afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, it is August the 8th, 220th day of the year. 145 days remain the year's over with. Well, let's look at the holidays and observances for August the 8th. International Cat Day, where you're expected to pamper your furry feline friends. National CBD Day, harnessing nature's botanical wonders. CBD offers holistic relief, promoting wellness and vitality through its natural properties. Scottish Wildcat Day. Join the movement fighting to protect the critically endangered Scottish wildcat. Vaccinate your own cats to help reduce their risk of preventable diseases. National Frozen Custard Day. National Pickleball Day. Sport born from a blend of traditional and innovation, embodying camaraderie and spirited competition. National Happiness Happens Day. National Mochi Day. Soft, chewy, and delightful bites filled with sweet surprises. Mochi offers a unique and satisfying treat experience. Odie Day. Everybody knows Garfield, the cat. But a lot of folks forget the canine companion that shared that comic strip, Odie. National Dollar Day. Whether it's a copper-colored penny with Abraham Lincoln's face on it or a $100 bill of Benjamin Franklin. The currency of the United States is all based on the ubiquitous dollar. Yeah, National Dollar Day is a great time to learn about and appreciate the banknote. Celebrate this currency in some fun ways, including run out and spend like you're wealthy. Well, let's have another holiday and observance for the August 8th is Global Sleep Under the Stars Night. Reveling in nature's embrace and gazing at the infinite cosmos. Find solace and wonder beneath the night sky. Lay on your back and watch the shooting stars. National Seek Some Zucchini on Your Neighbor's Porch Day. It's a lighthearted surprise, discreetly gifting garden abundance to your neighbors and friends. Take a penny, leave a penny day. National Tarantula Appreciation Day. It's all well and good to have the concept of appreciating a tarantula. When you come home and find one as big as a dinner plate hanging from your ceiling, that does raise interesting questions. National Perler Day. It's a moment that brings people of all ages to color pegboards with tiny beads. Crafters build patterns and fuse them and watch their pieces literally come alive. Top 8 Challenge Day. Milk, eggs, wheat, fish, peanuts, tree nuts, soy, and shellfish. If you remove these top 8 allergens from your diet, it's said you'll see your overall well-being improve. Shop online for groceries day. I did that once with Target. They were supposed to deliver in a couple of hours. I placed the order at 8 o'clock in the morning. It arrived at 11 o'clock that night. Wear Your Mother's Jewelry Day. International Alley Ship Day. National Graders Day. Digital Nomad Day. National Whataburger Day. International Infinity Day. Dying to Know Day. Crayfish Party. It's Elvis Week. Friday, August 8th to Saturday, August 16th. Celebrate the enduring legacy of a legendary artist whose groundbreaking music and charisma transformed popular culture forever. National Fishing Month. National Eisteddfod of Wales. It's a celebration of Welsh culture. Brings together the best of the nation's music and literature and performance arts. And that goes on to Saturday, tomorrow, August 9th. Brecon Jazz Festival goes on to the 10th. Transform the town of Brecon into a lively hub of music and culture. This event draws jazz enthusiasts from far and near, fills the streets with the sound of jazz. The celebration aims to highlight the diversity and richness of jazz music. Performances by local and international artists showcase the genre's wide appeal and creativity. All right. Stop on Red Week, Flower Fair, goes on through the 10th. Farmers Market Week, we did that last weekend. Probably do it this weekend too. National Marine Week, Bristol Balloon Fiesta. Fills the sky with a vibrant display of colors and shapes. Large and small hot air balloons float gracefully above the city. I went to a balloon fiesta back when I used to do events all over the country. And one balloon lost its ability to determine which way it was going to go, so they dropped a rope for folks to help keep the balloon in one location. And I wrapped it around a tree. And eventually, with the help of a number of other people and several automobiles, we got the balloon down. It was quite an interesting ride for the folks on board. International Assistance Dog Week, National Exercise with Your Child Week, encouraging outdoor play and fosters healthy habits, and Simplify Your Life Week. And of course, let's not forget the Big Butterfly Count. Famous people born on this date, Dustin Hoffman. Well, let's see what we have in the news. Well, Cincinnati still having problems. Police are outnumbered. Citizens are attacked. Mayor's under fire for police management after a viral beating exposes the lax bail laws. If most police have what's known as a revolving door. You bring them in, you write them up, you turn them loose, and they go back and do it again. When I was young, if you got arrested, you were there. Cincinnati mayoral candidate has blasted the city's lax bail policies after that viral brawl. You know, that viral beatdown took place in downtown Cincinnati. It's captured the nation's attention. The news conference days after the assault, Mayor Aftab Purval announced the attack while violently found the assailants and hold them accountable. Of course, that hadn't happened. Well, you know, the journalists and the talking heads love to attack President Trump and his wife Melania. Now, she just posted a victory over James Carville. He had to remove a podcast alleging she had an Epstein connection. He actually apologized for claims about the First Lady. She made that post on X on Thursday after Democratic strategist James Carville retracted claims disputed by her lawyer. He opened his latest episode of the Politics War Room podcast with a legal note, abandoning his usual folk sin avuncular style for a more serious tone. Gutfield joined Jimmy Fallon on the late night show. You know, when the show starred Jay Leno, it had a massive audience. And now Fallon is so far to the left that the audience, of course, has suffered. Well, colorectal cancer diagnosis has soared among younger adults for one key reason. It surged 50% in one age group following updated screening guidance. According to 2 studies by the American Cancer Society, there's been a recent surge in colorectal cancer in people ages 45 to 49. Scientists found after 15 years of stable colorectal cancer trends, U.S. diagnosis of local stage disease skyrocketed in this age group from 2019 to 2022. Lead author Elizabeth Schaefer, associate scientist and cancer researcher, said it's a promising news because the uptick in cases is likely due to first-time screening in the wake of new recommendations for younger average risk adults to begin testing for colorectal cancer earlier. 2018, the American Cancer Society lowered the recommended age for screenings from 50 to 45. So a lot more people had it than we thought. Well, if you know anything about military basic training, it used to be drill sergeants got up in your face from the moment you hit the parade ground. Well, then we had a softer military. Well, according to Hexeth, we're going back to basics. It considers reversing the Army's ban on what's called aggressive shark attack training. The traditional practice involved drill sergeants swarming recruits and yelling in their faces. Well, President Trump's increased federal law enforcement presence in D.C. after the surge in violent crime. According to White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt, there'll be no safe harbor for violent criminals in D.C. after Thursday night. In 2024, juveniles accounted for 52% of all robbery arrests in D.C. Nearly 200 juveniles were arrested for violent crimes in D.C. had prior violent crime arrest. In 2025, more than half, or 51% of all carjacking arrests in D.C. involved juveniles. And the number of juveniles arrested in D.C. has gone up each year since 2020. D.C. police arrested more than 2,000 juveniles in 2023 and 2024. That seems to be the new hobby, committing crimes. Well, Superman actor Dean Cain, now fighting real-world immigration battles, he's been sworn in as an ICE agent to support vilified officers enforcing immigration law. I don't know how him becoming an ICE agent is supposed to do that, but there you go. Well, Disney settled a wrongful termination lawsuit with former Star Wars actress Gina Carano. She was a Mandalorian actress, fired in 2021 over a controversial social media post comparing conservative treatment to Holocaust. Vegas casino owner is fired back at exaggerated claims about the Sin City's demise. He's noted a mixed bag of opinions on Sin City tourism's current state. Derek Stevens, Circa Casino and Resort CEO, told Fox News that reports claiming tourism is falling in Las Vegas are a bit exaggerated. And even as reports indicate Las Vegas tourism was down overall, he told Fox News in an interview the assessment may be premature. In June, only 3.1 million people visited the Sin City, down 11.3% compared to last year, according to the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. And That may or may not be true. Well, President Trump and President Putin's relationships deteriorated as the war between Russia and Ukraine rages on. A woman's been accused of treating thousands of patients while pretending to be a nurse. Advent Health employee faces identity fraud charges after internal investigation reveals an alleged licensing deception. This is in Florida. A Palm Coast woman has been arrested, posing as a nurse and providing care to thousands of patients despite lacking the proper credentials. Flagler County Sheriff's Office confirmed that 29-year-old Autumn Bardisa, taken into custody at her home while dressed in medical scrubs in a statement released on the department's Facebook page. She's accused of presenting herself as a licensed nurse and administering medical care to more than 4,400 people between June 2024 and January 2025. Investigation has determined she never held a valid nursing license during that time. She'd been employed at Advent Health Palm Coast Parkway beginning in July 2023, but her contract was terminated in January 2025 due to what was called internal concerns. Well, excuse me. Trump allies emerged as a key player in a historic $9 billion spending cut victory. Republican freshmen emerged as a key White House ally. Missouri Senator Eric Schmidt bridged the gap between the White House and the Senate GOP on federal cuts. He was able to advance President Trump's desire to claw back billions in federal spending, an effort carried to fruition for the first time in nearly 30 years by a first-term senator. Well, Sean Hannity has said it best. Democrats are nothing like the party they used to be. They spend more time undercutting the system than they do helping it. Well, evacuations have expanded to Los Angeles as wildfires have exploded, covering nearly 5,000 acres. Parts of LA County have been evacuated as canyon fire explodes. Firefighters said in a late-night social media update that some 2,700 people have been evacuated in LA County. Of course, if you listen to Mayor Bass and Newsom, it's all their imagination. There's no fire. Well, Andrew McGann's DNA matched evidence at the Devil's Den State Park crime scene. He's a teacher who's admitted to murdering a couple. He's a 28-year-old teacher, and he's admitted being behind the alleged murders of a couple who were on a hiking trip with their kids July 26th. He killed Kristen Amanda Brink, 41, and David Brink, 43. Well, they were on a hiking trip with their children at Devil's Den State Park in Washington County, Arkansas. That's a popular family travel hotspot. And he's a teacher. Now, it's a bipartisan bill that's targeted the Russian economy with sweeping tariff powers. The Sanctioning Russia Act threatens Moscow and its allies with 500% tariffs. That'll get their attention. Well, President Trump has signed an order opening 401ks to private markets, which means that the financial firms previously began developing new investment products in anticipation of this executive order. White House said in the fact sheet, the executive order directs the Labor Department to re-examine its guidance on alternative asset investments in 401ks Another defined contribution retirement plans and clarify the fiduciary process for offering asset allocation funds that include these type of investments. A man was caught on video attacking pro-life protesters. Got a slap on the wrist by the judge. Patrick Bryce gets home detention after assault left a 73-year-old woman with permanent eye damage. He's a 28-year-old man who was caught on video attacking two pro-life activists outside a Planned Parenthood clinic in Baltimore. His sentence? A year of home detention and 3 years of probation. Baltimore Circuit Judge Yvette Bryant rebuffed prosecutors' calls for a 10-year sentence against this man after he was found guilty on 2 counts of second-degree assault and reckless endangerment in relation to the May 2023 incident. The victims, of course, were upset. They said, "What about my rights and my well-being?" Well, judges apparently are competing with each other to see who can be the most lenient. Well, President Trump's nuclear submarine chess move is said to send chills down Putin's spine. He breaks traditional silence on submarine locations after Medvedev's dead hand remarks. We're going to wind up with a shooting war. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Well, Aberdeen has a Scottish city's greenlights a new visitor tax amid widespread over-tourism trends. It's a new 7% tax on tourist hotel stays to boost the local economy. Never mind that it takes more out of the pocket of the tourist. I wouldn't go to a place that had a special tax on tourists. You know, teachers' unions have lost. Parents win under a major policy move. That's according to a red state schools chief. For far too long, the teachers' union have used standardized testing to keep states in line with their woke standards, according to the Education Department. Oklahoma State Department of Education is eliminating statewide standardized end-of-year testing for several subjects as part of an effort to give local control back to school districts. It's going to take, these changes will take place in the 2025-2026 school year. It's going to impact math and English courses in grades 3 through 8. You know, one of the worst things that ever happened, in my humble opinion, was all this woke stuff. Now, CBS host says Stephen Colbert is an equal opportunist when it comes to jokes. He actually imitated former President Biden as part of his Wednesday monologue. That statement came from CBS anchor Nate Burleson. Colbert's show is going to end in May of 2026. Burleson's fellow co-host Gayle King and Vladimir Duthers agreed with Burleson. He said one thing we love about Colbert is an equal opportunist when it comes to cracking jokes. He's also not funny, in my humble opinion. Used to be, before he got the call to be more democratic. Well, on that note, we got one other thing. Conservative activist sued Meta. It's name is Robbie Starbuck. He's going to work with Meta's product policy team to combat political bias in AI models. When even the AIs are going woke, you know there's an issue. Well, let us now talk about aliens and UFOs and Skinwalker Ranch. All right, we'll have it up in a minute. There we go. You know, there's been a lot of whistleblowers who come forward and said that we're far more invested in UFOs and aliens than we've ever admitted. And as a result of this investigations, new ground was broken in methodology and scientific approaches, especially in regard to cattle mutilations. Now, if you're not familiar with the cattle mutilation, lights in the sky will be seen, and the next morning when the farmer or the rancher goes out to work with his cattle, some will be found dead and mutilated, and body parts will be gone. The cattle mutilation protocols actually evolved into a rigorous set of procedures that were adopted for every one of these investigations. Regardless of the location, a qualified veterinarian was always called and arrived on site, standing over the dead animal within less than 36 hours in a mutilation event. Well, they also began to do more, and this was all done in secret, by the way. Now, the Air Force announced in '96 that with the closing of Project Blue Book, we're going to quit chasing lights in the sky. There's nothing to UFOs. It's all your imagination. Well, in actuality, in large part thanks to Senator Harry Reid, more scientific investigations began in secret, and the programs became classified, and instead of UFOs, it became UAP investigations, which were much more respectable, I guess is the term to use. They're actually in the budget under different bizarre names. Now, there was a concept called TransHab, pursued by NASA in the 1990s to develop a technology for expandable habitats inflated by air and out in space. When deflated, expandable modules could provide a quantum leap in lower cost launches and lighter compact spacecraft. When expanded, transhabs would inflate to 8.2 meters diameter, many times the diameter of an uninflated module. Well, in 2000, despite multiple program successes and over $1 billion in investment, Congressional House Resolution 1654 was signed into law prohibiting NASA from conducting further research and development on transhabs. Now, if it was a successful program, you have to wonder why Congress would stop it. Also, by 2000, Bigelow business acumen foresaw that the NASA TransHab program, shuttered by Congress, was a timely opportunity to license and develop this novel expandable technology in the private sector and actually make a difference to the U.S. space program. So Bigelow licensed the TransHab technology, said about accelerating, optimizing the development of expandable habitats. Now you've got to wonder if Bigelow knew the shuttering of this program was going to take place. If you've got the inside track, you can make an unbelievable fortune licensing technology the government throws to the curb. Now, Bigelow purchased a 50-acre parcel in North Las Vegas, and almost overnight, multiple large buildings began to appear on the property. 2006 and 2007, Bigelow launched two small proof-of-concept expandable spacecraft called Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 from the Baikonur launch facility in Kazakhstan. Most of the work leading to the development and successful deployments in orbit was 100% funded out of Bigelow's own pocket. If you believe that, I got a bridge I want to sell you. Now, building from the dual successes of Genesis 1 and 2, multiple spacecraft were rapidly developed at the cavernous Bigelow facility in North Las Vegas, including Galaxy and Sundancer, and ultimately B330, the company's flagship space station. Now, on April 8, 2016, after only a few years of development, NASA launched into low Earth orbit the Pathfinder beam. That's the Bigelow Expandable Activity Module. That was a spacecraft and carried in the trunk of a SpaceX Dragon. 8 days later, on April 16th, the small beam spacecraft was seized by the Canadarm2 robotic arm and successfully berthed on the Tranquility node on the International Space Station. Beam was the first privately owned, human-rated spacecraft in history to permanently attach to the International Space Station. In actuality, a dramatic demonstration of the success of Bigelow's fledgling company. Now, you can't tell me that this wasn't built on the research done before Congress conveniently shut down NASA's own research program. Beam was a revolution in spacecraft technology. More importantly, Beam broke a decades-long pattern of spacecraft development by the large aerospace corporations, costing hundreds of millions or billions of dollars. It cost NASA less than $18 million. NASA got to test this novel expandable technology for pennies on the dollar, according to NASA Deputy Director Ori Garber. In less than 2 years of operation on the International Space Station, NASA was so enamored with the Beam spacecraft it granted a Beam life extension contract to Bigelow for multiple additional years on Tranquility Node 3 on the International Space Station. In other words, NASA opened up its wallet and just poured money into Bigelow's pocket. Following on the Beam's success, Bigelow began investing large sums of his own money into the most ambitious spacecraft yet. Called the B330 for its 330 cubic feet in volume, it was destined to be a fully autonomous space station in its own right. It could be launched on multiple commercial launch vehicles in a volume of 60 cubic meters. When in orbit, would expand to a full 330 cubic meters. And in addition to a full suite of life support systems to support 4 astronauts indefinitely in and beyond low Earth orbit, the B330 was designed to have autonomous power generation, guidance, navigation and control, avionics, propulsion, and thermal control systems. In other words, it was a flexibly designed space station capable of supporting in low Earth orbit. It was a standalone space station on the lunar surface and lunar gateway as a transit point to the moon or to Mars, and even as a Mars transit spacecraft. Now, Bigelow's B330 was a great interest in NASA, both as a potential free flyer in low Earth orbit, but also as a potential Mars transit vehicle. Well, when Nevada Governor Steve Sisolak imposed a mandatory closure of all Nevada non-essential businesses as a COVID countermeasure in March of 2020, Bigelow Aerospace took a hiatus. Of course, the pausing of the company he had built since 1999 was a bit of a disappointment to Bigelow. already invested $350 million of his own money towards making a difference between the development of a groundbreaking technology that had the potential to revolutionize cost and access to low Earth orbit, the lunar surface, and even to Mars. Now, beginning in 2008, Bigelow was also one of the main driving forces in the creation of the AAWSAP. It began in September 2008, but then in 2010 it distinguished itself within the DIA as a highly professional, scientifically oriented organization. Now, in June of 2020, Bigelow embarked on another intellectually stimulating adventure by creating a brand new organization called the Bigelow Institute for Consciousness Studies. The mission was to study the survival of human consciousness after death and the afterlife, utilizing scientific method as well as other creative modalities. Regarding his reasons for exploring the survival of consciousness, in an interview, Bigelow told Matt in January 2021, if people can be helped in the grief situation and a sorrow situation by information, and any information in something that hurts, it helps you. It's a good thing. Well, it's interesting to note that some of the same names show up in this area of research. In addition to Bigelow, we got Keller, who reported directly to Robert Bigelow at 4 separate organizations spanning 20 years. He observed that the Bigelow management style combined efficiency with the organizational flexibility and fast turnaround problem solving. Bigelow doesn't suffer fools gladly. I don't know how he could work with Congress. Now, let's turn our attention back to Skinwalker Ranch. Now, there's been a lot of stories coming from this ranch since it first hit the news. And tied up in the story is James Lukatsky. In addition to being an exceptionally qualified ballistic missile physicist, intelligence analyst with decades of experience, he had a curiosity with interest that often strayed far away from the arcane confines of his craft. When The Hunt for the Skinwalker came out in March of 2007, he read it and it intrigued him. He says, I was legitimately interested in this as useful to the military and useful to my particular group, which was looking at possible threats to new weapon systems. And he said that was what attracted his attention. He was particularly captivated by the book's accounts of the paranormal, and the more he read, the more alarmed he became that something technological of uncertain ownership might be operating undetected in U.S. airspace. After all, a lot of different objects that flew silently had remarkable aerodynamic characteristics and wildly different shapes and sizes seemed to have infested this particular quiet corner of the state of Utah. If they were flying at low altitude around Utah, where else were they flying? Who owned them? Who was flying them? And why were they flying them? Well, he was shocked to learn that a team of professional scientists had covertly spent years with full funding and utilized the scientific method, studying bizarre phenomena that could only exist in comic books and horror movies. And he wondered how much of an eye-opening project had so successfully flown under the radar for so long. This goes back to my earlier statement. Taxpayer dollars have been quietly spent in classified programs that you don't know anything about. In April 2007, Lukatsky sat down with his friend Jonathan Axelrod in the BWO office in Washington, D.C. Began relaying to him the bizarre tales and Hunt for the Skinwalker. Now, Axelrod listened politely and skeptically. And as he was shipping out on covert assignments to Iraq 2 days later, he volunteered to take the book with him. And according to what he said, he sat around the pool in the Green Zone in Baghdad during his downtime and began regaling his colleagues about the cattle mutilations and intelligently controlled orbs and weird flying machines and bizarre creatures that seemed to be commonplace in a remote, unpopulated corner in northeastern Utah. When he finished the book, he gave it to an intelligence community colleague who also read it avidly, and within a month, during early September 2007, Hunt for the Skinwalker became the most popular book to read around the pool in the green zone. Well, after some internal discussion with his colleagues and superiors at the DIA, Lukatsky decided to take the bull by the horns. On June 19, 2007, he wrote a bombshell letter, an official DIA letterhead to Robert Bigelow, asking him to visit his Utah ranch for the purpose of developing a strategy on how his office would characterize the potential threat aspects of the phenomena encountered in your research efforts. Now, the dry clinical prose of the letter belied an extraordinary audacity and showed that Lukatsky was no ordinary intelligence agency bureaucrat. He was willing to take a risk. After a few weeks of discussion, he was in the air on his way to meet Bigelow in Las Vegas. And his quiet, understated physicist, intelligence analyst, and charismatic aerospace billionaire were a study in contrast, but they formed a bond at that first meeting that would be game-changing in the years to come. Well, on July 26, 2007, Lukatsky and Robert Bigelow flew to Vernal, Utah, the nearest airport to the ranch that could accommodate Bigelow's private jet. In an hour of landing in Vernal, both men were walking on the property. Bigelow and Lukatsky wandered on the property for a short while and then headed for the nearest building. At the end of the entrance to the ranch was a small picturesque dwelling that had been named Homestead 1. Housed Gene and Richard Dietz. A husband-wife team had been diligently managing the ranch property on Bigelow's behalf since 1999. Bigelow introduced Lukatsky to the managers in the dining room and kitchen of their home, and which they had lovingly upgraded to a comfortable two-person home. And Lukatsky said later he was transfixed by something behind where the couple were chatting. An unearthly technological device that had suddenly and silently appeared out of nowhere in the adjacent kitchen. It looked to be a complex, semi-opaque, yellowish tubular structure. He didn't say anything, but he stared at the object, which was hovering silently in the background. Looked away, looked back, and it was still there. It remained visible to Lukatsky for no more than 30 seconds before it vanished on the spot. 2 hours after they had arrived on the property, the two were back on the way to the airport. Although conversing normally with Bigelow, Lukatsky said his mind was racing. Here he was, a ballistic missile physicist, a senior analyst at the DIA without any history of encountering anomalies, and he had just seen a vision like anything he'd ever witnessed in his life. He confessed later, prior to that stunning vision, he had never seen anything unusual. Yet within a mere 60 minutes of being on the Skinwalker property, he had clearly seen in broad daylight a technological device in the adjacent room within a few feet of where he was standing. This wasn't a blurry photo of a distant saucer in the sky. This was an in-your-face, up-close and personal apparition of some kind of technology. And the fact that he and he alone of the four people in the room had seen it was also not lost on Lukatsky. What were the odds of something like that happening? You remember reading that the NIDS teams had spent hundreds of hours on the ranch and encountered anomalies only occasionally. But within an hour setting foot on the property, he had seen a spectacular object. Well, later on, while researching for some approximation of what he had witnessed during that astonishing 2-hour interlude on the ranch, he came across a photograph with the album cover of Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells, and there it was. The structure depicted on the album cover wasn't exact, but it was pretty close. So in the days after the ranch sighting, Lukatsky began to formulate a plan for capitalizing on his extraordinary experience. He was absolutely convinced there was some kind of significance in his vision. It's difficult for him to imagine that some random event had occurred to him precisely during the 2 hours he had spent on that legendary Utah ranch. Personal nature of the event motivated him to follow up with his superiors on the DIA on the need to study the threat potential of technology of unknown origin in the U.S. airspace. Of course, his discussion revolved around the existence of UAPs, which is the polite way of saying UFOs. Suffice it to say, in 2007, there were a few men who could have accomplished what Katsky, Bigelow, and Senator Harry Reid achieved. It helped that Bigelow was a longtime friend of Reid, and he was able to talk with him about the extraordinary history of UAPs at the Utah Ranch, as well as on the recent astounding experience by a high-level Defense Intelligence Agency analyst on the same ranch. So it didn't take long for Senator Reid to connect Jim Lukatsky with Senators Daniel Inouye of Hawaii and Ted Stevens of Alaska in the Capitol building meeting. Stevens had experienced his own sighting of a UAP as a World War II pilot, and Senators Reid and Inouye were strongly convinced there were serious U.S. national security implications from the thousands of highly qualified UAP sightings by credentialed professional individuals within the airspace of the U.S. that had gone on for decades. Well, in the toxic political environment of 2021, it seems almost quaint to imagine a bipartisan triad of powerful, long-serving senators working together for the security of the U.S. They lobbied the leadership of the Senate Appropriations Defense Subcommittee to create the $22 million appropriations language for a program to research threat potential of UAPs. Had they called it UFOs, it would have been a non-starter. But as a UAP, it now was worthy of being discussed, even though it was the very same thing. Senators also designated the Defense Warning Office at the Defense Intelligence Agency the architect of the program, which was thoughtfully named the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program. That's the AAWSAP I've been talking about. Specifically because the program and the money was targeted at the Defense Warning Office at the DIA. No other names for the program are either contemplated or discussed. And the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program name was created in order to make sure the $22 million program element reached the Defense Warning Office, and only Defense Warning Office at DIA. No variations on the name would have been allowed because of the technical nature of the PE, financial conduit. And the result of this careful use of language was a unique, successful program that broke new ground in the history of the ambiguous relationship between the U.S. government and the UFOs, now officially known as UAPs. Well, the upshot of this extraordinary partnership was that in 2008, an official solicitation, also known as a request for proposals, from the Defense Intelligence Agency appeared on the FedBizOp website that invited aerospace and defense companies to compete for a 5-year funding contract to study advanced aerospace threats. The FedBiz Opportunity website is one of many standard vehicles where the U.S. government agencies and the departments publish requests for proposals. And this DIA request for proposals specifically that it requested a study focused on 12 main areas of advanced aerospace performance: lift, propulsion, control, power generation, spatial, temporal translation, materials, configuration and structure, signature reduction, human interface, human effects, armament, including radio frequency and directed energy weapons, and other areas in support of the first 11 performance items. A glance at the list of specifications for the study for advanced aerospace vehicles included such items as spatial temporal translation and human effects, and indicated the entire list could also be utilized for the study of unidentified aerial phenomena. The key point to keep in mind is that the official solicitation appeared publicly, requesting proposals from all aerospace defense contractors. Now, there's nothing out of the ordinary about the open competitive nature of the solicitation, certainly no sole sourcing involved. But according to the DIA sources, these 3 separate aerospace companies expressed interest in submitting proposals. 2008 Robert Bigelow formed a sister company to Bigelow Aerospace and responded to the DIA solicitation. The new name of this new company was Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies, or BAASS. And it's understood that nobody else actually officially submitted a proposal to the solicitation. So in actuality, it was sole source. In September 2008, Robert Bigelow was notified that the BAASS had won the contract, and Jim Lukatsky was designated as the program manager and contracting officer. Funding for the first year, as I said in a previous show, was about $10 million, with the opportunity to renew the contract on an annual basis after that. And as always, Robert Bigelow moved fast once he'd been awarded the contract. Within a few weeks, he'd allocated a building for the program, begun the process of extensive renovations in anticipation of obtaining a facility security clearance for the structure. And in addition, he began to reach out to several of the old NIDS Science Advisory Board members in order to solicit advice and input on quickly building an organization. Early November 2008, Bigelow had hired Colm Keller, who rapidly transitioned from a biotechnology management position in San Francisco to recession-hit Las Vegas. He was the first full-time employee that Bigelow hired. His job title was the BAASS Deputy Administrator. Bigelow, of course, was CEO and primary administrator. For Keller, this sudden transition was the world of medicinal chemistry, dealing with the deadliest viruses on Earth, to an official, fully funded government program to tackle UAPs was certainly a dramatic change. Well, the major challenge for the newly formed company was to build the organizational structure as well as the security infrastructure for handling classified documents and communications devices. And while this is being done in Las Vegas, Lukatsky faced the daunting task of accelerating the normal, slow-moving government side at the DWO. Within weeks of landing in Las Vegas, Keller had begun the process with advertising and interviewing for this new organization. Early December 2008, he'd already conducted multiple telephone interviews when retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel Douglas Kurth presented himself for interview at Bigelow's corporate headquarters. Kurth, of course, had an impressive resume. He was a quiet spoken, but he also exuded professionalism and efficiency. Within 10 minutes of the interview beginning, Keller knew he had his second hire. Toward the end of the interview, Kurth dropped a bombshell. He said in his previous career he'd been the commanding officer of the Red Devils, a Marine Corps FA-18C squadron that was part of the USS Strike Group Nimitz, southwest of San Diego, in December 2004. He went on to describe in detail his participation in what became known as the Tic Tac event in 2021, the most famous UAP case in the world. Keller had listened as Kurth described in measured tones, how about 30 minutes after being airborne from the Nimitz carrier on that cloud this day, he got a radio call asking him to investigate an unidentified airborne contact. As Kurth approached about 15 nautical miles from the reference point, he descended through 15,000 feet and saw that a large disturbance on the ocean surface. He said the sea was surprisingly calm that day, with rolling swells but no surface waves. And Keller knew about this event. During the event, the United States Navy Commander David Fravor was now famously seen and engaged with the identified object that later became known as the Tic Tac. And it could be an important case to investigate for the fledgling organization as part of this new contract. Kurth wrote up his recollection of the Tic Tac case and even produced a comprehensive list of eyewitnesses that could be contacted, which was submitted to Jim Lukatsky at the DIA. Well, Lukatsky in turn brought his friend Jonathan Axelrod in on the case, and within months, Axelrod and his team had comprehensively interviewed and obtained detailed testimony from more than a dozen pilots, radar operators, and other witnesses from USS Nimitz, USS Princeton, and a number of other sources. Well, as the world now knows, the case remained on close hold within a small group at Bigelow's company, the DIA, until 8 years later when the explosive New York Times article of December 2017 hit the global public like a sledgehammer. Even in June 2021, Keller found it ironic that in spite of the tens of thousands of newspaper articles and blog posts and TV shows since the December 2017 article first broke about the TikTok case, nobody yet focused on the foundational and fundamental roles that Doug Kurth and AAWSAP had played in making this extraordinary UAP case public knowledge. Well, back at DI headquarters in Washington, D.C., Lukatsky was the primary mover and shaker in the fast-tracking many of the BAASS infrastructure processes. Keller and Bigelow and Lukatsky had initiated many of the security infrastructure requirements, and Lukatsky was able to disentangle some of the red tape and expedite in weeks. A lot of processes normally took months to be accomplished. Also, in another indication of the accelerated progress of a government program within 8 weeks of the initiation of the contract, Keller, Bigelow, and the team had submitted a comprehensive project management report to DIA that comprised the first deliverable requirement as part of the contract. And to make it clear, the AAWSAP was the official DIA designated name for the contract, and the BAASS was the official organization tasked with executing the AAWSAP contract. So within this classified program, you clearly had the good old boy system working overtime. Once the plan had been accepted by the DIA, Lukatsky and his colleagues became amazingly effective at running interference to the project to protect the AAWSAP from the usual hordes of bureaucratic parasites and bottom feeders that were endeavoring to get some of the contract's money. In fact, Lukatsky and his team were 100% successful in protecting the AAWSAP finances from assorted haircuts and taxes and ties and other bureaucratic attempts to extract money from the program. This DIA contract thus became a shining example of the original program money actually being used for its stated purpose. Of course, without the almost incestuous arrangement of Reed and Inouye and others running interference, this wouldn't have been possible. And on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be back tomorrow, and once again, this is Friday. We'll be back Monday, and once again, we'll be talking about UFOs and UAPs and strange things wandering a ranch in Utah. Until then, Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening.